Hello and welcome to the Life and Memoir Circle, a podcast for readers, writers and tellers of true life stories who loves a good memoir. I'm your host, Vig Gleason, and you are exactly the person I want to have a conversation with today. So use the link in the show notes and get in touch. I can't wait to hear your story. Hey, it is great to be back. Thank you so much to all my listeners for all your wonderful encouragement to keep going and all your many questions. As I promised in my last episode, today I will share the first chapter of my book. I know that some of you are going to ask how long it took to record and edit this chapter. So what you will be listening to today is 24 minutes long. That took me about an hour to record. And because I'm planning on recording the whole book, I had in my mind that the best place to record it would be in my wardrobe. So I was standing while I was doing it and found that was a very long time standing and breathing and reading. And there was also some strange noises that came from my equipment rather than the outside world. So I am going to rethink where I am recording from when I do the audiobook. While I was recording, there were some very funny stumbles and laughs. So I did an outtake on those, which you can find on my Instagram account. I'm going to share it in my story and then I'll put it together for the highlights. So yeah, go and have a laugh. I might put it on my private Facebook one as well. And when it comes to editing, that has taken me now 2 school days, because that's how I work when Ruby is at school, and another half day on a Friday, because Friday is always half day with us, to compile and put it all together. And then what I need to do is to send you an email to tell you about it and put a post up on social media, on Instagram and my Facebook page. All of that, of course, you will find the links in the show notes. Thank you for all your other questions and suggestions as well. I am compiling all of them so I can answer you maybe in the next podcast, which will hopefully be next week. It does take me a little bit longer than I plan, but I'm really enjoying this. So I'm going to keep going and I hope you will keep listening. And without further ado, let's head over to Speak Truth Lies and listen to chapter number 1. Chapter 1. Arrival, 2018. I lift my head and let the sun kiss my face. The sea breeze cools me down after a long day of driving. From my hometown, Ålesund, in the summer heat. My daughter Ruby is beside me telling funny stories. Her jumping jack shadow, black against the white ferry deck, stretches taller than her in the early evening sun. I inhale the fresh salt smell of sea from the highest passenger deck. Ahead lies the island of Atløy, only a short 15-minute crossing from Askvoll. Not enough time to contemplate what will greet us when we get there. It's been 14 years since I was last here, the only time I visited my father, the captain, on his island. That time he was waiting for me with his van parked behind the boathouse out of view. As soon as he released me from his bear hug, he tossed me the keys and with a grin said, "You're driving." The smell of booze hung in the air between us. "Why?" I asked. "Did you lose your license?" He grinned, so I kept asking, and eventually he admitted it was indeed the case. He never told me how he lost his license, but it was easy to guess why. We started calling him the captain when Ruby was small and wanted to know where my dad was. She was too young to understand why I didn't have contact with my father. So I told her he was the captain of a ship on the big sea. At the time, her favourite book was Astrid Lindgren's Pippi Longstockings, which I read to her over and over. Her imagination ran wild with the possibilities that her granddad was a pirate, with superpowers like Pippi's dad. It wasn't a lie, not back then when she was only 3 or 4. It was more like silken threads of truth spun into fairy tales. The truth wasn't age-appropriate at the time. Today, on the ferry, she's 11 and a half, and the image of a superpower granddad has faded behind the truth. As the ferry nears the port, the boathouse he once parked his van behind comes into view. A farm sits just above it, nestled into the mountain. I see him now in my mind's eye, waiting for me on the dock, grinning. When we roll across the ferry ramp onto dry land, he's not there, of course. The captain is gone. What's most heartbreaking is that he left without saying goodbye. I wonder why he didn't reach out, didn't let us know his end was near. What was so terrible that he didn't want to tell us? What stopped him from giving us a call? Dying. It's so final. Why leave with so much unsaid? Could it be that he thought he had more time? Or was he still angry with me for something? Did he blame me for not keeping in touch? Was I to blame? All week these questions have been spinning around my mind, churning up guilt and regret. For now, I let the thought go and instead focus on steering Mum's hybrid Toyota Yaris on the narrow bendy roads. Up the hill from the ferry port we pass Bunpris, the only grocery shop on the island. He must have stopped here many times, I'm thinking. And I hope I will meet someone with a good story about him. Someone to tell me he was a good man after all. For years I wondered what it would be like when my father died. Would I even be told before he was buried? It was Christian, my brother, who rang me on 18 July, a week ago. He had just spoken on the phone with Nora, the captain's companion for the last 12 years. She was there in the hospital with him when he took his last breath, close to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I rang her right after I spoke with Christian. I didn't know how I felt about the news of his death, only an urgency about what to do next. I was still on the phone with Nora when Shane came home from work with an enormous bouquet of flowers. He'd forgotten our 23rd wedding anniversary the day before and was making up for it with an abundance of roses. He raised his brows and shook his head when I didn't acknowledge the flowers straight away. My phone conversation was in Norwegian, and my Irish husband didn't understand a word. Shane and Ruby were both in the kitchen when I hung up. Bewildered more than sad, I had to take a moment. First to fuss over the flowers, and then I had to tell them. My dad just died. Ruby drew a shocked breath and slapped her palm over her open mouth. Her eyes wide, she studied my face as Shane embraced me, saying sorry. It was a long hug before his brain switched into action and he started making calls and checking flight schedules out of Cairo to get Ruby and me to the funeral on time. It was mixed emotions I felt that day. A sense of release mixed with anger and sorrow. Some emotions echoed the lament in Ruby's voice when she asked why she had to go to a funeral for a man she had never met. "He was your granddad," I explained. "He was my dad." "Yes, a granddad who didn't want to meet me." I didn't blame her for her bitterness. But was she right? Had he really not wanted to meet her? We moved to Cairo a few years ago for Shane's posting at the Irish embassy there. With no direct flight to Norway, the journey takes 22 hours. After an overnight flight, we landed in Ålesund, where we stayed with Mum in a one-bedroom apartment. 20 years after their acrimonious divorce, Mum has no interest in going to the captain's funeral. Even if she wanted to, she's too frail. Still recovering from a serious autoimmune disease that struck her down in January. "You and Ruby can take my car," she suggested when Christian and I were planning our trip to the island and wonder how we'd all fit with our luggage and provisions in one small car. He drove his own Toyota Yaris. Ruby and I followed on his tail, something we were grateful for when we saw sparks fly from his car as he had a slight collision with a roadside barrier. The drive from Ålesund took much longer than the 6 hours Google Maps predicted. We hit several roadworks and waited in queues for many ferries. Then Christian got a puncture. Now he's stranded 2 hours away in Morskog, awaiting roadside rescue. On the narrow roads of Atle, I slow Mum's car to a crawl at the top of the hill, where the church sits on a cliff looking out over the sea. "Look," I point out to Ruby, "this is where he'll be buried." We strain our necks to get a glimpse of the 300-year-old Stavkirke before it disappears from view. The speed limit varies between 50 and 80, but we snail around the tight bends at 30. I make mental notes of the pocket of passing places should we have to pull in or reverse for oncoming cars. The road, the only road from the ferry port at Järvik to the fishing port of Härlan on the other side of the island, is too narrow for 2 cars. In places, it's dug into the side of the mountain with a dramatic drop into the sea, like here, just past the marina. How did the captain make this arduous journey all these years, from his house at Härlan to the ferry port, without a license to drive, I wonder? My breath catches when we reach the top of the mountain, where we get a full view of Härlan, with the open vista across its fishing harbour and the many islands beyond. And then, stretched into the horizon, the North Sea. This is coastal Norway at its most spectacular. Bathed in warm sunshine, the sea a reflective mirror of the cloud-free sky. Blue, royal blue. From garden flagpoles, pennants in the Norwegian national colours of red, white and blue wave a lazy welcome. Red farm buildings and white houses dot the green and rocky landscape. As we descend towards the fishing harbour, seagull cries float through our open window. I turn off the radio to hear their calls. The clear, fresh smell of sea crystallizes my senses. It was amongst this beauty the captain, my father, lived for 17 years. It's busy around Härlan. The yearly Krabbe Festival is on this weekend. The ticket seller on the ferry had asked if we were going to it. "I'm here to bury my father, but I hope to taste the crabs too," I told him. He didn't know what to say to that. I have forgotten where the turn-off to his house is, but I see the house from the new pub and holiday rentals, where we stop at the harbour. It makes it easy when I ask for directions to Per Perland's house and point to the red building at the top of the hill. The young man I stopped to ask points back in the direction we just came from. "Take the first left and follow the road up the hill." I thank him and get back in the car. I remember it well now. The steep incline that snakes around the bend and crawl up to where his house, which he named Knausten, comes into view through the massive garden hedge. There is a new lean-to by the living room veranda. It looks good, a greyish-white that doesn't match the faded red paint on the rest of the house. I turn up his weed-green gravel drive and park behind what must be Nora's car. The neighbour is hanging up washing next door. I go over and introduce myself. She gives me her condolences. I thank her and hint at an apology for any inconvenience it's caused them living next door to a grumpy old man. I smile. We start chatting, and her husband joins us. It's Marta and Harald. They've lived next to the captain for, 15 years? They haven't seen much of him in the past 2 years. He kept himself to himself, indoors mostly, says Marta. She guessed he was sick, but didn't know it was this serious. The day is still hot, and Nora has waited hours to meet us. When Ruby rings the doorbell, an electric bird chirp chimes above us. I open the door and we laugh and call out our hellos as we walk up the narrow, steep stairs. Laminated in a ship deck imitation, each step is reinforced with a lip of steel, nailed down, just like on the ferries and ships he'd worked on. The top of the stairs, where there once was a door, opens directly onto a ramshackle living room. "Oh my God," I whisper. "Jesus," Ruby echoes. "Did he live here?" "Hello," says a familiar voice I've only heard on the phone before. Around the corner by the kitchen is Nora. She's short and round with cropped light brown hair. A towel hangs around her neck, covering her expensive bosom. She sways when she walks towards us. I bend to hug her. It's our first meeting, but after hours on the phone during the past week, it feels like we've known each other always. Our embrace is one of welcome recognition. "So you made it then?" Nora giggles and opens her arm wide to Ruby, who awkwardly steps forward and accepts her hug. "Look at you!" Nora takes a step back and holds Ruby at arm's length, drinking her in. "Aren't you beautiful and tall?" she says in Norwegian. Ruby shrinks under the compliment without understanding a word, nor does she have a word in reply. "Yes, she's grown up beautifully," I reply to Nora in English. The big smile I give Ruby is met with an eye-rolling, "shut up, Mum" look, so prevalent for her pre-teen age. "Why don't you have a look around?" I suggest, giving her a way out from feeling awkward. She slinks off to explore the ramshackle little house. 2 large gilded framed photos hang on the wall where we have stopped for our embrace. "Oh, look," I say, "my confirmation portrait." Nora and I laugh as we take in the large photos printed on canvas to look like paintings. In the first frame is me at 14, wearing my national costume, looking longingly into the distance, away from the lens, all Lady Di-like. In the second is my little brother at 7, with a bright cheeky smile, complete with brand new front teeth. Eyes fixed on the lens. He's looking proud in a navy blazer, thumbs nonchalantly in the pockets of his beige chinos. He was such a gorgeous boy. There is a sizable tear in the canvas of my portrait. "What happened there, then?" I stick my fingers straight through it. "Yes, I saw that," giggles Nora. "I have no idea, but the walls were so bare I thought the photos would brighten the place up a bit, so I hung them up anyway." So he didn't have the photos hanging on the wall. I follow behind as Nora slowly moves past the large fireplace into the spare living room, chatting about the cleaning and straightening out she's been doing in preparation for our arrival. I had told her not to clean the house, that I would do it, but I'm grateful for all the effort she's made. "I wasn't going to do it, but your Aunt Una insisted. She reminded me about Christian's allergies, and then Emma, the daughter of a friend of mine, said she'll help me out and—" Nora's voice blurs into the silence as I let the state of the house sink in. Stripped of paint and wallpaper, the naked dry walls are stained with black soot, as if licked by fire. The ceiling, just the same. In the middle of the room sits a large, lazy boy, red ones, greying now, threadbare and tired with the worn-down indent of a man no longer here. I picture him sitting there, watching his large flat-screen TV, or looking out of the frameless, undressed windows, possibly dreaming up ideas of how he'd do up the place. The old sofa suite with matching bookshelves, bought more than 3 decades ago, and the unfinished renovation project transports me back to my childhood home. The captain always had a house improvement scheme on the go, projects that often left our home stark and hollow, though never as bad as this. Back then, Mum was there to create hygge, a cosy comfort, in the rooms he left intact. The year before my confirmation, I was 14. After he finished renovating the basement, complete with storerooms and a snug den, he stripped bare our living room, threw out the wall-to-wall carpet and started rewiring the electrics. "I've never seen such shoddy workmanship," he complained about the building contractors. Our house, recently built with only one previous owner, was part of a huge housing estate. The hundreds of timber-framed houses were mass-produced and shot up in record time. I was giving the captain a hand running cables through the plastic pipes we'd laid the day before, through the loft, from one end of the house to the other. He'd also left me in charge of making dinner, bangers and mash. I was in the kitchen with a crime novel and the potatoes on the boil, waiting for him to holler from the loft. "Vigdis, pull the black cable, slowly till I tell you to stop." Back and forth from the kitchen to the stripped living room, where piles of wood planks for mouldings and flooring were stored under thick sheets of plastic, I darted. "Pull, pull, pull," he shouted from the attic. "All right, that's it. Stop." I drained the potatoes and started to mash, adding a dollop of butter and a splash of milk. "Vigdis, Vigdis, are you there? Pull the red one. Do you hear me? Pull the red one now." His shouting jolted me, and the splash of milk turned into a pour. Milk splattered on the counter, where I quickly abandoned the carton and rushed to the living room, yanking and pulling the cables as he instructed. "That's it. It's true. You can leave it now." Back in the kitchen, I held the potato masher up above the pot. "Oh shit," I muttered under my breath when I heard him clumping down the attic ladder, tool belt jingling. Entering the kitchen, he headed straight for the sink next to the worktop where I pretended to mash the drowned spuds. He opened the tap and with a square of green soap started scrubbing his hands, all the way up to his elbows. He looked into the pot. "What the fuck?" "Yeah, sorry about that. Potato soup, right?" I tried to be brave. "I'll give you potato soup." Standing right beside me and still he was shouting. "You have one thing to do, one fucking thing, and you can't even get that right." He shook his hands with vigour, water droplets landing everywhere, before tearing the hand towel off the hook inside the cupboard door below the sink. "I'll boil some more potatoes and add them in," I suggested. "It won't take long. It'll be fine." "I'll give you fine." He slammed the towel down on the draining board. "Your mother is about to walk in the door. Do you think she wants to wait another hour for dinner? Fucking useless you are." His nostrils flared. "Get the fuck out of my kitchen." I just stood there, frozen to the spot, as he grabbed the pot and slammed it in the sink, hot potato soup flying everywhere. "I said get out of my sight." His face was bright red. I leapt out the door and down the stairs to my room. Diving onto the bed, I burrowed into my pillow to muffle the tremendous roar that erupted from my chest. "I hate you, I hate you, I hate you." Shortly after the failed potato soup incident, he went back out to sea, leaving the living room suspended in mid-DIY chaos. Much like he's left his house now, only this time he's not coming back. "Are you all right?" Nora gently strokes my arm and brings me back to the present. Yes. I blink, the mist from my eyes. She smiles. I scramble for something to say. Lost in my thoughts, I hadn't heard a word she'd said. "He's had that a long time." I nod towards the old sofa suite. A large coffee table sits in front of the dejected tufted leather sofa pushed up against the soot-stained wall. "Oh yes, it's seen better days," Nora says. "Are you sure you're okay?" "I'm fine," I nod. "It's just strange, being back here." "I know," she says, stroking my arm again. "Can we bring in my suitcase, Mum?" Ruby steps through the veranda door from the garden. "Yes, of course," I say, glad of the interruption. "Where do you want us?" I ask Nora. "I thought you two can take the bedroom downstairs on the right, and Christian can have Per's room upstairs." Per is the captain's real name. With Nora's instructions, Ruby and I head back down the ship stairs and out to the car. The boot and back seat are full of beddings, suitcases and bags of food, thoughtfully curated to make us stay in his house as comfortable as possible. I'm glad of my foresight to bring our bedding from Mum's place. I was right in thinking the captain didn't have spare duvets and pillows. Let's make the bed first, I say, and load Ruby up with our duvet and pillows. Which way are you going? I've got it, Mum. Her Birkenstocks crunch across the gravel drive as I hoist out our suitcases and follow her inside. Which side of the bed do you want? I ask, stretching 2 single sheets breadth-wide across the queen-size bed, tucking the ends taut under the mattress. I want to be by the window, she says, throwing her pillows onto the bed. I roll out our 2 single duvets and smooth them down before I hoist the suitcase on top, unzip it and leave it there open for her. Okay, honey, I'll let you unpack yourself. I peek into the small wardrobe. There's no space in the wardrobe, so we'll just keep our clothes in our suitcase like we do at my mum's place. I'm good with that, Ruby says. I look at her and smile. Is there anything else you need? No, I'm good for now, she replies, and I go back to the car for the cooler boxes and bags of food. In the kitchen, Nora helps me put away the food we brought in Ålesund, knowing that options on the island would be limited. There is lots of room in his fridge and the cupboards, but the freezer is full. He used to cook up big batches of fish and meat, even vegetables that he froze in dinner-size portions. Nora chats as we work. I said to him, wouldn't it be easier to get some ready meals instead and save yourself all this work? Knowing what's coming, I start to laugh and butt in. Oh God, no. Ready meals? They're pure junk. Not worthy of human consumption. Yes, chuckles Nora. That's exactly what he said. Thank you so much for listening. I would love to hear your thoughts about this episode and how it relates to your story. Use the link in the show notes to contact me or find me on Facebook or Instagram at Vig Gleeson. That's VIGGLEESON. You can also find me by doing a quick Google search because there is only one Vig Gleeson in the world. So I'm very easy to find. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give me a 5-star rating and share it with your friends. It's so important to me that stories like ours gets heard, for it helps others to heal too. There are many more episodes to come, so please hit subscribe so you won't miss a single one. With love from me to you, I'm Vig Gleeson, and you have been listening to the Life and Memoir Circle podcast. Until next time, write on.